Do you follow is it Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong? Do you follow him?
No.
Okay, so Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, he bought the LA Times, like, I don't know how many years ago, many, many years ago. That's him right there. $8 billion guy. He came out and he's been talking a lot about, okay, I'm sorry, I was off by $4 billion. $12 billion guy, very successful, South Africa, first 24 years, never once watched TV. He was all about reading and learning. And he's been critical about chemotherapy. He doesn't say it's not good to never use it. He says there's places for it, but he calls it's like a nuclear bomb when you do chemotherapy in your body, right? And sometimes it also kills off the good things that you need that are fighting, So what is your position with chemotherapy, cancer, and the progress we're making with cancer?
So by the way, I did my PhD at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, which is the leading research center for pediatric cancer. And, they've done phenomenal work in lowering, the death rate of pediatric cancers, which are predominantly leukemias, lymphomas, glioblastomas. And I would tend to agree, depending on the cancer type, different chemotherapies are more effective. Now, and I would say for leukemias, lymphomas, things that are blood cancers, that's where it's effective because it's easy for the chemotherapy to reach those cells, right, in the blood. It's easy for it to reach the cells. When you're talking about a solid tumor in the liver, in the pancreas, in the breast, it's a different story because tumor cells become hypoxic, so they cut off the circulation to get to them. And so chemotherapy, it has to be delivered through the blood and circulation to get to the tumor site, right? And so that is probably what Dr. Soon-Shiong is referring to some degree. It is a blunt, tool in terms of cancer treatment. But it's been very effective, for example, with pediatric cancers and leukemias and lymphomas. In terms of what we can do to lower our cancer risk and also improve effectiveness of cancer treatment, there's, I think, a lot of evidence out there showing exercise really the key. I mean, exercise, for example, and not just any type of exercise, but more of that vigorous intensity exercise. In fact, there was a recent study in Nature Communications that came out. And this study was and we're talking like over 100,000, I think it was close to 200,000 participants that were wearing what are called accelerometers. So these little devices on their wrist. They're not measuring heart rate, but they're measuring like how fast you're moving. It's an accelerometer, right? And so it's empirical data where you can actually measure people's physical activity based on their movement. And then you can look at outcomes, for example.
Almost like a Fitbit, but except it measures
movement.
Electromechanical sensor that measures proper acceleration, the range of change in velocity.
That's right. So, for example, you're working out, you're running, you're moving your arms. It's measuring the movement. So the faster the movement it's sort of considered to be more moderate to vigorous intensity exercise, depending on how fast the movement is.
So if I'm walking versus running versus sprinting.
Right. So if you're very, very light walking, like walking around the house, that would be considered light exercise. If you are, I would say, fast walking, that would be more moderate intensity exercise. If you're jogging, that would be vigorous intensity in this study that I'm referring to, okay? The key here is that we have empirical data that was calculating, and I am going to bring this back to cancer, I promise, that was calculating how, the types of intensity of exercise, vigorous versus moderate versus light, and outcomes. So all-cause mortality, cancer-related mortality, cardiovascular-related mortality, type 2 diabetes. And what was found was completely astounding, okay? Very much different than what the normal current exercise guidelines are. So, for example, you may have heard, well, the guidelines say that we should do 150 minutes to 300 minutes of moderate intensity exercise per week to be, quote unquote, healthy, or 75 minutes to 150 minutes of vigorous type of exercise to be healthy, right? So you basically cut it in half, 1-to-2 ratio. By the way, that was all based on caloric expenditure, right? Okay, we're not talking about losing fat. We're talking about wanting to prevent cancer, cardiovascular disease, dying from all causes, including respiratory causes, right, of illness. So that number is out the window. This new data shows that if you're doing vigorous intensity exercise, the type of like jogging, for example, swimming, tennis, like that's all vigorous intensity, that for every 1 minute you do of that, if you're wanting to lower all-cause mortality, you have to do 4 minutes of moderate intensity or an hour and a half of light. So talk about efficiency.
1 to 4 for every 1 minute is 4 or hour and a half of light?
So for every 1 minute of vigorous intensity is 4 minutes of moderate intensity. You have to do 4 minutes to get all-cause mortality. Light is an hour and a half.
Stop it.
That's for all-cause mortality, dying from all non-accidental causes. It gets better. If you're wanting to prevent cardiovascular disease, cardiovascular-related mortality, for every 1 minute of vigorous, okay, this is cycling, this is jogging, swimming, you have to do 8 minutes of moderate intensity, okay, moderate, so that would be like, you know, speed, like walking with more intent, right? So you're more speed walking. So 8 minutes of that. Or again, you're getting into like the hour to 2 hour range of light exercise. So that would be just walking around the house, basically. For cancer, if you wanted to prevent basically cancer mortality, for every 1 minute of vigorous intensity exercise, you had to do almost 4 minutes, so 3.5 to 4 minutes of moderate intensity, or 2.5 hours of light walking, okay? And so the point here being is we have a lot of control over our disease risk, including cancer. Exercise is the key, and not just any type of exercise. You have to get your heart rate up. You have to move, right, faster. You have to have this, you know, more intent type of exercise. And this kind of goes, I would say, along those lines, we have what are called the VILPA studies, the vigorous intermittent lifestyle physical activity studies. And these are studies also with accelerometers where people are doing vigorous intensity exercise, but it's not a structured type of exercise. So they're not just getting up and doing 1 minute of body weight squats or, you know, a minute of high knees or jumping jacks, all these things I did this morning, by the way.
What time?
They're doing, they're
What time did you exercise this morning?
Here? Right after I woke up.
Here?
No, yeah, here in Fort Lauderdale, yeah. So basically, they're doing, you know, they're sprinting up the stairs to get to work. They don't take elevators. You know, they're doing that sort of everyday situation, right? Individuals that do, let's say they do 3 minutes of that just brief burst of getting their heart rate up, moving, you know, walking really like fast or, you know, sprinting up the stairs, and they do that 3 times a day, okay? So it's a total of 9 minutes of vigorous exercise a day. That's associated with a 40% lower all-cause mortality and a 40% lower cancer-related mortality compared to not doing it, and a 50% lower cardiovascular-related mortality. Okay, this is phenomenal because it really shows that you don't have to go to the gym and spend an hour at the, you know, at the very least, if you can accumulate these short bursts of exercise. They have to be at least a minute long to have an effect. 3 minutes if you're really going for that robust effect. If you're only doing 3 to 4 minutes a day, it's still associated with a 30% lower cancer-related mortality. Again, to bring it back to the cancer, you know, there are things that you can do to lower your cancer mortality risk and to lower your cancer incidence as well. Diet, obesity accelerates 13 different types of cancer. So weight loss is also something that's critical and really does lower your cancer risk, okay? But let's say there's this scenario where you get cancer and there is a genetic component. Let's say you just, you know, the genetic jackpot, unfortunately you got it, right? You have cancer. There are now studies, and I had a researcher on my podcast. It's a new field. It's called exercise oncology. So Dr. Kerry Kernier, he's also from Canada. He's one of the leaders in this field of exercise oncology. And what he does is he does studies with individuals that already have cancer, a lot of prostate cancer. He looks at also colon cancer and breast cancer. And these individuals that are undergoing perhaps a classical type of standard of care treatment like chemo or radiation or the combination of the two. But he adds on exercise to that therapy. And those individuals, it's dramatic how much they respond to the cancer treatment, much, much better, where they're killing the cancer cells, the tumor is shrinking, they're dramatically improving their cancer survival, so their mortality goes down and their recurrence goes down. So every possible metric is improving if you're adding the exercise onto a classical cancer, you know, treatment therapy. So again, I think exercise is that toggle, and it's so, so important. And I know I talked about a lot of things, and there's a lot to unpack
No,
here.
I mean, it's interesting. Again, for you, it goes back to a process of something I can't control, right? In a society of living in short term, when you're talking about obesity, all the obesity stuff that we talked about earlier with GLP-1, I can take GLP-1 and be at a body weight that I'm okay with, right? Let's just say I'm 5'6", 135, and I'm a female, 45 years old. But if I don't exercise, that doesn't prevent me from the risks I have of here. I still have to exercise to prevent this from happening. 40% lower cancer, 50% lower cardio if I'm doing 3 minutes, 3 intervals of 3 minutes of HIIT throughout the day. That's insane to look at how simple that is. Because we have that time. We can do that.
Totally. You have that time in here, and the reverse is also true, Patrick. So for example, a really good biomarker of whether or not you do cardiovascular exercise is something called cardiorespiratory fitness. It's often measured as VO2 max. Have you heard of this?
Mm-hmm, of course.
It's maximal oxygen uptake
Right.
during maximal exercise, okay? All you have to know is that cardiorespiratory fitness is a biomarker of your health and longevity. So for example, there have been studies showing that people with a high cardiorespiratory fitness are 80% less likely to die from all-cause, whatever that is, fill in the blank, cancer, cardiovascular disease, respiratory disease, right, than someone with a low cardiorespiratory fitness. But what's even more compelling than that, well, that's not surprising. We just talked about that. If you're physically active, you're going to be healthier. You're going to lower your risk of, dying early from any of those diseases. What's interesting is that people that have a low cardiorespiratory fitness, that predicted their early mortality the same or even like more than smoking, than type 2 diabetes, than cardiovascular disease. So in other words, having a low cardiorespiratory fitness was like having those diseases in terms of early mortality risk, showing you, and this goes back to what I said earlier, being sedentary is a disease, and we need to start thinking about it as a disease. It's a disease. You need to be physically active. And to avoid that disease, you have to get up and move, and it doesn't have to be an hour in the gym. It can be these short, brief bursts of what are called exercise snacks. Now, this is the more, I would say structured type, like I did this morning. You get up and you do, 3 minutes of body weight squats. You do 3 minutes of jumping jacks. You do high knees, something that gets your heart rate up, something that makes it where after you're done, you're breathless. You're sweating. You get sweat on your brow. Like that stuff you can do and make it part of your personal hygiene.
Do you still jump rope?
I do. It's part of my routine.
Every day?
I don't do it every day. I do a lot of what's called CrossFit types of exercising. So I do Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. I do an hour-long sort of CrossFit type of workout. What includes oftentimes jumping rope. It includes a lot of explosive types of working out.
By yourself or with friends?
I have a trainer that comes to my house twice a week, and the other 2 times I do it at my friend's house with my friends. And so, right. it all, whatever works for you. Yeah. If you don't have access to it, trainers help because there's accountability and they're really like helping you just kind of get that structure and that routine. But I think, in addition to, the reason I work out is actually for my brain, to be honest. Like I know all these other benefits. That's like the positive side effects, in terms of like lowering cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, like cancer, all that is I do it for my brain. Like I absolutely need to work out to function and to feel happy. So, and this kind of goes down I don't want to go down this whole like rabbit hole of happiness, but that is a component of longevity. And some people, if you're like me and you're more prone to anxiety, you're more prone to obsessing over things, that can. What
is your birthday? What month?
June.
June what?
26th. So Cancer.
June 26th. We got married on June 26th. Our youngest daughter is born June 26th. And one of our good friends is born on June 26th, their daughter. So June 26th for us is a big day.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah. So anxiety. So you're saying prone to anxiety, why? Because you're competitive, prone to anxiety because of your own personal standards and expectation of yourself. Why prone to anxiety?
I think all of the above.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm definitely very competitive. I also, you think about a lot of things, a little bit like you kind of obsess about a lot of things in details and you kind of go down that rabbit hole. And when you start to like go too deeply about too many things, it can make you start to see things and then worry about them. You know,
Are you more the engineer brain or the conspiracy brain you were talking
engineer.
about? You're more the engineer brain.
Yeah.
Logic, systematic,
Yeah.
step by step. Why do we do it this
Yeah.
way?
Definitely.
Got it. So
Definitely.
predictable. Are you like data-driven type of
Yes.
decisions being made?
Yes.
Okay, so
that's why evidence-based.
When we set out to create a shoe that blends comfort, function, and luxury, we had the choice to make it fast. We had the choice to make it cheap. We chose neither. Instead, we chose Tuscany, Italy. We chose true Italian craftsmanship, each pair touched by 50 skilled hands. We chose patience, spending 2 years perfecting every detail, and we chose the finest quality at every step. Introducing the Future Looks Bright collection. Not rushed, not disposable, not ordinary. Rather, intentional, luxurious, timeless. If you enjoyed this video, you want to watch more videos like this, click here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click here.